Hello and welcome back to Old Soul Podcast. My name is Bree, that's spelled B-R-E-I. Thank you so much. Today's film commentary / review is going to be about the film Panic Room. It was released in the year 2002 with a runtime of an hour and 52 minutes, and it has a rating of rated R. The director of this film is David Fincher. I have seen this film one other time, so rarely do I talk about films that I haven't seen before, but because a lot of the films that I talk about tend to be from different times, different genres, I will have seen a lot of films as a young kid or teenager, and now I'm kind of going back and watching them again to see if I still had similar taste or if that film was actually really good, because I think a lot of people will say that they'll watch a film and they'll love it as a kid and it's sort of nostalgic and it's sort of ingrained in their brain, and then they get older and it isn't exactly what they thought it was, whether it's underwhelming now or it's scary now or it makes no real sense now and you're an adult and you're like, what is this? So that's just something I've noticed with like a lot of films I've been watching, although I don't always talk about all of them on my podcast. This one in particular, I remember liking it as a kid, and I was like, yeah, Jodie Foster, Kristen Stewart when she was very young, those things. As I got older, I was like, yeah, I remember that film that they were in together. And then I was like, yeah, let me just go watch it again. And then I was like, I really like this, so let's talk about it. So the film basically begins with this new sort of journey of this mother and daughter duo who are moving into a new home. We do see a clip of the mother sort of looking over the house with a realtor or some sort of person in real estate showing her the house with someone who I assume is the mother's friend or someone she knows, basically also guiding the conversation of like, oh, this is like a once in a lifetime house, so you're not going to get a better deal, so on and so forth. Obviously trying to make a sale, but also like, yeah, it seems like they're in like New York or some bigger city. There's a backyard, the house is huge. I'm sure it's expensive, but like it definitely seems like a good deal. Although the one thing about the house that the mother notices and thinks is kind of weird and suspicious is this panic room. So basically it has steel doors, like steel all around the room. There are cameras in the room, there's a phone in the room, there's like first aid kits and supplies and stuff. It sort of seems like something nowadays we would call like a doomsday room, kind of. That's the vibe that it gave me. But it's definitely sort of labeled as a panic room. Apparently the owner that lived there before, I think they mentioned that it was like an older guy who lived there and apparently had a lot of money, and clearly he added that into the house. And then you don't even really notice the room is there because there's like a wall and a mirror over it, but like it just looks normal. Like if you didn't know that the room was there, you just wouldn't know that it was there, which I think is the point. But besides that, the family does decide to purchase the home and move into the home. And this mother and daughter, you can see there's some tension, like the kid's just being a kid, but also the mom's kind of disciplining them. I think the daughter was riding a little razor scooter around. She's like, no, don't have the scooter in the house, things like that. There's kind of a bit of bickering there. And we see it even after they moved in and they're unloading boxes. It's sort of like a new start, but it didn't seem like a new start that they were excited to be journeying into. And you find out that the mom was basically cheated on by her husband, who is now with some other, probably younger woman. Like, it's not a new story, it's not okay, and it sucks, but this is where they're at with it. And apparently the daughter knows about the situation because there is a moment where the daughter is sort of, I think, comforting her mother in a way, and they're eating dinner or just getting done eating dinner, and she says something to the extent of like, he's the problem, and I think she's talking about her dad in a way, and I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember the exact quotes, but you can tell the mom doesn't really want to talk about it, and that maybe she is also sort of protecting her ex-husband, because even if she's not with him anymore, it's still her daughter's father. So I think she kind of wants her daughter to still see him in a certain light despite all that. And of course, we don't really get a lot of context into that, but it's just enough to leave you guessing. It's just enough to let you know that there's some fractured issues in this family. And moving forward, the rest of the film basically is the house getting broken into by three men, and two of which seem familiar with the house and familiar with the previous owner and that specific panic room. And this all happening on the very night that the woman and her daughter have moved into the home, is really scary because it's their home, but they're not familiar with anything yet. So they're not used to anything yet. So they're sort of in uncharted territory, which is sort of ironic in your home, right? And you can tell that as soon as the robbers get there, they're sort of like, wait, what's going on? No one was supposed to be here. They did know that those people were moving in, but I don't think that they thought that they were moving in as quickly as they did. It's like they have intel, like they were aware of this, which means they were definitely keeping track of things, but apparently not well enough. And there are three different robbers, and honestly, I don't remember their names, and I'm sure you can go and look that up, but I think their personalities give way to who they are throughout the film, regardless of the names. So we have one robber who apparently has some sort of relationship with the owner who lived there, who I think was like an old guy and who had a lot of money. And this guy apparently just did whatever the guy wanted and sucked up to him in the hopes that he would get money. I don't know if they were family or if they were in a relationship. That kind of boggled me, and I still just cannot recall the details of that even now. But there was clearly something that they had before. And then there's another robber who actually is the person who built the panic room from the beginning, and it's clear that they know the floor plan of this house. Like, they tried to get in, they couldn't, so they went to the next level, and they tried to get in, they couldn't, and then they went to the next level. Like, they literally, this was premeditated for sure. This was a planned out situation. But he has sort of this weird moral compass, which is weird because he's trying to break into someone's house. But like, he doesn't want to kill anyone. He doesn't really want to have to hurt anyone, especially not a woman and her child. But he is desperate for this money, and whether it is for something personal at home or something important, we know that there is an emphasis on his morality to still be some good Samaritan despite what he's doing, and that makes him a likable villain, I'll say, but nonetheless a villain, right? But I did catch myself like, oh my god, this guy's kind of, I don't know, what he's doing is wrong, but I also am like, oh, they want me to empathize with him, and I do kind of, and he's the only one that I did empathize with besides the victims, obviously the mother and the daughter. And then there's another robber who apparently wasn't even supposed to be there, but the guy who had a history with this older gentleman who used to live in that house, not the guy who built the panic room himself, who works for that security company that was also a part of the cameras and everything in the panic room with the previous owner. He's kind of like the guy who's in charge, but like doesn't really seem to know what he's doing or is making some mistakes that he shouldn't be making. And then the third guy, he's very angry and aggressive, and he doesn't want anyone to know his identity. He's the only one wearing a mask. He's the only one who feels like a very villain-esque robber whose only personality is to incite violence and anger. He has a gun. He doesn't There's like several times where he creates a lot of the uh, arguments and friction, and he really is so annoying. But I do think that his presence moves the film along, and that it creates real fear in the film beyond just being stuck in a room in a house that you just moved into. And no one can get in, but you also can't get out. So that's what this film is about. So with all those other elements. So as the mom realizes that someone is in her house, she basically ends up getting her daughter into the room and herself as well. These men obviously try to get her, and they're not happy about her getting into the room because they can't get to her. They can't keep her quiet. Luckily for them, she has not gotten all the systems together, although the cameras are still working. I think she was able to turn on the phone, but it's not specifically to that room, and it does come up later, but it still doesn't really work out. Her cell phone doesn't end up working in that room. There's a point where she tries to get her cell phone. There's a lot of instances, and I think it's going to be easier for me to just explain them really quickly and to get to the point, because I'll just be going over the whole movie at this point. So there are several attempts to get help. The mother and daughter try to flash a light through this like really small cylinder space. I don't really know what it is, but they try to do like a flashlight into this neighbor's window, and I don't think that it helps because the neighbor shuts their blinds, and if they did end up calling the cops, it didn't help in an immediate sort of way that they would have hoped, right? And the mom tries to, like I said before, at some point she gets out of the room, which they try to do a few times to grab things or to help each other or whatever. When I say each other, I mean the mother and daughter trying to help each other. She gets her cell phone, but the service doesn't work. She notes that the phone in the panic room doesn't work because she didn't have time to get that set up. And so she has to try to grab a cord that's connected to the basement. And she does almost get it, but they pull the wire before she can really call the cops. But I think that she actually calls her ex-husband. So that was an attempt that didn't necessarily fail, but again, it didn't give them immediate help. And the husband does end up showing up. He says he didn't call the cops, but he actually did. The cops show up. The cops show up way later, and a lot of other things happen in between. But just so you have some context there, I'm trying to think of other things that happen or other attempts. She does leave the panic room another time when her daughter has sort of an attack. I believe that her daughter has some insulin deficiency. I don't know if it's diabetes specifically, but she has a seizure. She has sort of a monitor on her hand, maybe to monitor her blood sugar. Throughout the film, the mom is telling her, just breathe, stay relaxed, we'll be fine. And obviously, as things aren't getting better, the daughter, she needs food, she needs something sweet, she needs this, she needs that, and they don't have access to that. So the mom does run out to try to get that medicine for her daughter. And then the guys end up in there, and one of the bad guys has to give her the shot, which he does do, and it happens to be the one with morals who actually helps essentially save her daughter in a way. And again, humans are really complex. They can be very terrible people and do good things to people that they don't necessarily dislike. It's just, there's a lot of things in this film that I think speaks on values and morality and subtleties. The way that the camera is shot, especially in the beginning of the film, how it roams around the house, the way that there's a lot of dark lighting, and we're in this house and it's like late night, early morning, and they're in this enclosed space and they are alone and they can't get help, and there's three men basically threatening them. I mean, they have this intercom in the panic room, and the mother tries to speak to them, to reason with them, or basically threaten them to get out of her house. That doesn't work. They know this house from the inside out more than her, which is, again, the irony of this all, but it works so beautifully. The director did such a good job with that. And also, can I just say that Jodie and Kristen look like they're related? Okay, the casting was great. They really look like a mother and daughter, and they act like it too. And the dad bringing in the tension of like, now there's someone when he shows up, and they were able to get him there at some point in the film, when obviously I was going over all the things that happen in terms of him trying to get out and this being somewhat of a success. The dad is almost a weakness for them, because now everything before was about getting out of the room and getting to safety, but obviously seeing on the camera that these men are still roaming around and watching you. But now a piece of your family is out there, even if you are fighting with them and hate them right now. And he is getting kind of beaten up by them, and I think that the guys use that as a tactic to try to get them out of the room, and it kind of sort of works. Again, you have to watch the film to see those layers. The tension that the director creates with the actors as the three bad guys are sort of self-destructing. The whole point of them being here, which I haven't mentioned yet, and breaking into the house, is for money. Another reason why the panic room is such a big staple in the film isn't because it's odd or it's different or it's interesting, but because there's money in there. There's like some sort of paper that are apparently super, super expensive and worth a lot of money. And they're there because those papers were hidden in that room. So literally the worst place that the mom and daughter could be is that panic room. But obviously it's a panic room and you have it, so why wouldn't you use it? And again, it was their first night in the house. They wouldn't have discovered that yet. It was hidden pretty well. So that's the goal. Like this, it's the center of the film, of the plot, of everything, and it's just executed so well. And so they need them to get out of the room for two reasons. One, we need to make sure you're not calling the cops on us, so on and so forth. Two, we need the money that's in that room. So the villains create this interesting layer because they're arguing with each other. They don't get along, most of them. Things aren't going according to plan at all from the very start, but they really need and want that money. They kind of beat each other up, and the mom sort of beats them up. There's one scene where they tried to get the mom and the daughter out by putting gas into the ventilation so it could like knock them out at the most. And then one of the guys, I think the really rude, violent guy, turns up the gas more, and basically the mom grabs something like a light or something and she flames them up, and it burns one of the guys' faces up. And it's really cool how they fight back, and really people come out with real injuries in this, unfortunately, but like it also shows how dangerous everything has gotten over this money. And it isn't just the victims who emotionally would be scarred, but physically as well, especially the dad. He gets roughed up a lot. The mom nearly gets beaten by that violent guy. The daughter gets slapped around at the end for sure. She also has that attack. It's kind of brutal sometimes, for sure. So just so you know. And then yeah, so things like that. I think one of the guy leaves halfway through the film because he's just like giving up. Or he tries to leave. There's a gun involved, remember, there's a gun. So no one goes with clean hands, that's for sure. But especially, obviously, the victims are the most affected by this. It's a film that I think will be timeless, right? It already is, sort of, because it came out a while ago. But I think the acting was superb. I think that the plot and the direction that the director went is very good. And I genuinely feel like, as I watched it, that for the first time in a long time, although I've seen some really good films this year, that it felt just so good to be watching a movie. And I tried just now to give you context about the real fight that went on in this film, what was happening, the characters, the plot, the overarching themes. But a lot of this, and a lot of the times that I'm doing reviews, I just really feel like my goal is to get you to watch the film, right? And to prepare you for what to expect, so that if you know that it's just not your cup of tea, then you won't be wasting your time and there will be another film that you'll enjoy. But if everything that I said sort of feels like your vibe, you definitely should go watch Panic Room. And you'll get so much more context when you watch it from beginning to end with all the variables, and you'll see what I was talking about. Ultimately, this film felt kind of new, even with the technology being outdated, I suppose, for 2024 standards. It didn't feel old. I really liked that aspect, and it still had quite a bit of technology in the film for it being 2002. So, yeah, it was a good watch. It was a great watch.